Okay, and we are live with another edition of the Cross Politic Countdown. I'm Andrew, joined by Justin and Kevin. Kevin, a contributor for Cross Politic. Justin Chartrey, managing editor, Cross Politic News. Welcome, one and all. Lots to get to, and I'll tell you what, friends. We're going to start off. Kevin, you have an article about the recent passing of Pastor Voddie Baucham, and it has been there have been many great voices that God has used in the church that God has called home in recent months. We think of John MacArthur, of course, Charlie Kirk, and Voddie Baucham. Kevin, let me just kick off with you. I'll bring up your article here in just a moment so everybody can see it on the website. But talk a little bit about what you've learned and some of what you wrote in your op-ed.
Yeah, so one of the things that sets Voddie Baucham out or distinct from anybody else is just his background of being raised by a single mom in the around like what he wasn't in the gangs, but he said it was very rough upbringing, and he brought a tenacity with him just from those hardships into his gospel ministry. It's one of the reasons I titled the piece "A Gospel Warrior," because every aspect of his life he was always fighting something, but it wasn't just so that he could be pompous or successful. He was fighting the enemies everywhere he saw it, and so he took a bold stand for the gospel truth. He took bold stands for manhood, what it meant to be courageous, and I think the one underlying discipline that really uh, functioned for his ministry was just the sufficiency of Scripture in every aspect of life.
You note in your article, born March 11, 1969 in L.A., as you said, raised by a single mother, South Central L.A. He had his conversion was playing football at Rice University. Went to Houston Baptist for his theological training. Got his doctorate of ministry out of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. And you just here's the tweet here that you just mentioned. The gospel is more than enough. Justin, as I mentioned at the top, the church particularly has been affected by the loss of voices that we've counted on to proclaim the message of the gospel to the masses, particularly in the West. Those three voices, MacArthur, Kirk, and now Baucham, are now home with Jesus. What does that mean for the church? What should be our compelling response and action?
Yeah, for Voddie Baucham specifically, he was somebody that I was not really aware of until I think in a lot of Christians maybe in this camp, but not really aware of his ministry until COVID and the aftermath of a lot of the race riots and the things like that happening in Minneapolis. His book Fault Lines that came out in the aftermath of that, some things that he was doing publicly to stand against even how the church was responding to a lot of the DEI initiatives, speaking as a very courageous voice for truth in the middle of that. You know, he's somebody that for me, it allowed me to go back into his prior works and see just the long history of his laying groundwork for the recovery of the family, the recovery of the strong husbands and fathers leading their families in worship and things like that had been really missing from a lot of the parts of Protestant Christianity or evangelicalism. There just haven't been strong voices. And so I look at him, I look at MacArthur. I find it very interesting that both of these men had prominent roles in giving the church a voice and a spine again when it came to some of the government overreach during COVID, a lot of the pandering to the DEI, Black Lives Matter, and those kind of things. For those men to be able to stand strong in the middle of that, MacArthur being sued by the state of California, Voddie Baucham being railroaded by so many different parts, even of so-called Christianity, and those kind of things. These men, their final hours in the on this earth, 5 or so years has been spent galvanizing the Christian church to carry on that fight. So, when I look at this, part of me wants to ask why. Why now? We need these voices. We need these men who have been bold and courageous. But it's almost as if God is also speaking to the rest of us who have been impacted by these men and their ministries. It's now time to carry that torch.
His church, Family Baptist, when I planted a church in Florida a million years ago, that's actually when I first heard and learned of Pastor Baucham, because they had a family integrated service. You brought your family with you, and we thought, my wife and I, were really both impressed, and not impressed just in terms of, wow, that's awesome, but it impressed upon us the intergenerational aspect of worship and worshiping the Lord together as a family. And it was a principle we carried over into that church plant. And so I've been following his teaching. That would have been 2012 at least, long time ago. See here, Kevin, you brought in this X post. I wish there was a name like tweet for X anymore, but I don't know. There's not a good one, this post. But Voddie Baucham mentioning Christians are required to be militant in the civil sphere. I'd like to get both of your takes on this, but Kevin, we'll start with you. We're told, right? Christians are told to sit down, shut up, don't mix your religion and politics. In fact, don't talk about either one ever. But really, Voddie Baucham, even going back to when I first discovered him, was he had his Fault Lines, the book, and his work on critical race theory, his critique of that through a biblical lens, that put him on kind of the national scene. But his message hadn't changed. He was saying the same things in 2012 and the same things prior to that. What do you think in terms of Christians being required to be militant in the civil sphere? Do you agree with Pastor Baucham there? Do you find maybe an element of not necessarily disagreement, but of difference in terms of how you would encourage Christians to be active and engaged civically?
So yeah, I'll start out by just saying that when Baucham would preach, he would profess and proclaim the lordship of Jesus Christ, and he would make very clearly that title of lordship, it was the same thing in the ancient world for the king, for the highest ruler, the potentate, the Caesar Kyrios. Caesar is Lord, right? And so the declaration that Jesus is Lord was a direct aim at any sort of civil magistrate to claim the power of lordship. And Baucham was a student of church history and would bring so many aspects to bear with the Council of Chalcedon. You've got the declaration that Jesus Christ is the only Lord. No civil ruler can claim that title. It was exclusive to Christ. And when we recognize that, and that we recognize the call of dominion that mankind has been given by God, this application of our faith to be militant in the civil sphere is the natural outworking of taking every thought in every area of life captive to the obedience of Christ. So that was Baucham's whole press on that requirement. It's not that everybody needs to get elected to office, but everyone needs to recognize that every area of life, including the civil magistrate, is under the lordship of Jesus Christ.
Justin, what are your thoughts on should Christians be militant in the civic? I mean, that word militant, even itself, that carries a lot of baggage, at least culturally right now. As Kevin said, that militance might be more of submitting everything under the lordship of Jesus Christ, more of a dedication spiritually to these things. But what is your take on that stance, and what would you encourage Christians to do?
Yeah, I think it's really important for Christians to understand their history too. As Kevin mentioned, Pastor Baucham was a very great student of church history, and one of the terms that historically the church has used for those of us who are in this, earthly sphere in this mortal coil is that we have to be the church militant. We are in a spiritual war. That's language that's not just for people to create violence or rebellion, like so many people would use that term now, but it is scriptural language. It's biblical. The Apostle Paul tells us that we are in a war where we are fighting against the principalities and powers of this age. We are fighting against the rulers and dominions, Lord, that have set themselves against the lordship of Jesus Christ. And that includes the civil sphere, because either you are in submission to Christ or you're in rebellion to Christ. Him being Lord and King is a non-negotiable. So everything else just matters how you respond to that lordship. So in terms of that, I mean, it's not overusing language. It's not being too shocking to just say that the church does need to be militant. We need to understand that we're in a battle every day of our lives. We're in a battle against sin, against temptation, but also against the powers and dominions of this world that seek to set themselves against Christ and pull people away from Christ and increase darkness. So yeah, the only alternative for Christians is, we don't hide our heads in the sand. We don't put our light under a bushel. We will stand firm in the public sphere and proclaim Christ as Lord.
Justin, one more question for you, and then Kevin, I have one more for you on this story. Justin, for you, when these types of deaths happen, and what I mean by these types of deaths is when there is a prominent voice in any given movement, in any given sphere of life, people do glom on, and I don't mean that necessarily always insincerely, although some do. Some glom on because, hey, I can get some clicks if I put their name in the title or whatever, or I'm very emotionally moved by this. One of the things that you remember, George Whitefield, the great preacher, was once asked after a sermon he gave, how many of these people do you think? Or no, the reporter said, "Isn't it great that you see so many people receiving, Jesus Christ and coming to faith through your message?" And his response was, "Well, I'm going to wait 6 months, and then I can answer that question." Because there's a lot of emotional outpouring, all these things, and particularly with the church having so many of these voices, books we read on the shelves, people we admire that we share and retweet and repost and all that other stuff. There's a lot of emotional upswing to this. What would be an encouragement for the church? One, to make sure that we don't get so emotionally engaged that it's a quick 2-week burnout and then we go back to business as usual. How do we take the messages of a MacArthur, of a Charlie Kirk, of a Pastor Baucham, and not just treat them in vain as a brief piece of very solemn Christian entertainment, but really something that can be lasting in our lives and in our communities?
Yeah, I will say I think there's a definite importance for Christians to mourn with those who mourn, grieve with those who grieve, weep with those who weep. We should take these moments seriously. I know just even a couple of weeks ago, the amount of Christians that we spoke to personally, or connected to the life of myself or my family, the death of Charlie Kirk was hugely emotional, and that's something that in the moment we should take that seriously, take that moment seriously and reflect on it, reflect on the kind of impact that these men had on our lives. I will say Pastor Baucham, his book on what he must be, about looking at the prospective husbands of men who have daughters, like that book has been hugely transformational in my life, life of my daughter, and of the fiance, the man that she's going to marry. Those kind of things make an impact. So I think we reflect on those things. And then I think the main thing is when it comes to MacArthur, Kirk, Baucham, Dobson, these men that have passed on, is to remember the purpose of their of their ministry. It was not to elevate MacArthur, Baucham, Dobson, or Kirk. It was to elevate the name of Christ. So the way that the church has done and will continue to not let these men's impact fade into obscurity is to continue to proclaim Christ and him crucified, to continue to be forward with the gospel message that these men preached faithfully in public, behind the pulpit, or in their daily life.
Kevin, you obviously wrote the op-ed that we're highlighting here, and again, you can find that at crosspoliticnews.com. Right now, it's up even on the homepage. You can go there right now, crosspoliticnews.com. But Kevin, what is maybe one or two? If it's maybe hard, it might be hard to choose one, but what is one or two takeaways from the ministry of Pastor Baucham that most impact and influence you, either now or going forward?
So yeah, there would be too many to list off in exhaustion, because his book, Family Driven Faith, was instrumental to my father just in discipling me as a older young man, but just determining the course of my life. And I've read, at least I think I've read every book that Voddie Baucham has published. It's one of my highlights, was always getting to read the next book that was coming out by Voddie. So it shaped what it meant to be a man for my own marriage, going into marriage, preparing me for that. His life and ministry really captured what it meant to put presuppositional apologetics into direct application, not just as a theory, but how do we presuppose the validity of the truth of the claims of the Bible and actually share them with other people, whether it's in a one-to-one conversation, whether it's around a dining room table, whatever it is. Everything relates back to the Word of God for Voddie, and that has been probably the second most influential thing. Was just the power of the presuppositional arguments that he used. And I think I even got a clip on there with an interview from Ben Shapiro, and they were talking manhood, masculinity. And it's so easy in discussions on that to just focus on the external aspects of what it means to be a man. But Voddie consistently steered the conversation back into character. What is the character and the caliber of a man? It's not really the exterior aspects. Those will come. The outward facing is developed from what the truth transforms inside. So that for me those are some of the biggest highlights.
That's a great spot to leave that story. Let's move on now. Story number 2 from someone who certainly was you would not accuse of being a clickbaiter, to one who we thought was a champion for conservative values, but maybe not so much anymore. We'll take a look here and dig in. Candace Owens. The article by Luke Edison, cross-politic contributor. Candace Owens, warrior for truth or grifter for clicks. I want to move down here just a bit and give you a couple of moments, or a couple of excerpts from the article and her history. It notes, in the past few years, Candace Owens has become increasingly distant from the TPUSA crowd. Now, Charlie Kirk founded TPUSA in 2012. He was in TV spots and radio shows. Candace Owens joined TPUSA in 2017. So as she became distant, those of us who are right of center were justifiably open to the conspiratorial idea that government lies sometimes and is not always looking for our best interests. However, Candace brought this trend to another level, where, as the article notes, twisted half-truths, general dishonesty, and sensationalism are prioritized over legitimate fact-based concerns. After separating from TPUSA, Candace built a following online by leaning into a truly strange niche, distant from the Christian right after converting to Catholicism following her marriage to millionaire George Farmer. She was distanced from the religious and political alliance of Jews and Christians after his misinformation campaign, I think that's what that means, against Israel, sporting multiple embarrassing instances, so on and so forth. Then the article notes she became a known hypocrite with double standards concerning the morality of Ye, Kanye, and possibly lied about the Frankist conspiracy, the sex industry, history of her friend Andrew Tate, and ongoing legal situations there. And also knows during one of her rants about how Americans were about to go die for Israel, Candace lied about multiple forms of Trump policy and encouraged military members to get dishonorably discharged to avoid a war that never happened. And it goes on from there. Justin, let me start this conversation with you. I remember Candace Owens coming out, particularly with Brexit, black people leaving the Democrat Party, and she was big on that. And at the very beginning, seemed like someone okay who had, not woke, but had been awakened. I guess now the term is black pilled. I don't know, black pill, red pill. I'm not really sure. One of the pills. thought her eyes were open to, the realities of what was going on. And then, of course, has just been consistently kind of leaving. I don't know. I don't even know if she's drifting left or right, just kind of finding, as the article said, her own niche. Do you think from what you have seen of Candace Owens, is there anything genuine about her, or at least from what we can see publicly, or is it, as the article suggests, maybe just a grifter looking for clickbait and trying to find a niche there? What's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to thank you for highlighting one of the typos in our articles as the managing editor. That one got by me, so I will be updating that here after the call. But I will say, Candace Owens has constantly been somebody in the last, again, 2020 seemed to become the prism through which many of these people got their shining light. So, she burst onto the scene during and after COVID, connects with the Daily Wire, eventually severs ties with the Daily Wire. One of the things I think, and to be as generous as I guess I can, I would say from the beginning, she has been somebody in her podcasts, in her writings, in her, online media presence, has always stated she has constantly been somebody in search of the truth. So she does not just like to take people's words at face value. She has always said that she wants to investigate these things for herself. Where that has led her, I can't say I wholeheartedly agree with her conclusions or where those things have taken her or the relationships that it has severed in her public life. But I will say, I just based on the evidence of what has happened, I don't know that I necessarily would say I think she's just a grifter looking for clickbait. I do think that she has constantly been somebody who has sought for answers and looked for truth in a lot of different ways, at least until I've, seeing some of her antics and responses to Charlie Kirk's death.
Kevin, you're a journalist. We have been talking a lot in the country about free speech lately, particularly with the Jimmy Kimmel suspension, and then he's back and all that kind of thing. Do you think, though, that as a journalist, let's say you posit a theory or a few theories that some find fringe or niche or whatever or conspiratorial, are we on the right? Are we doing a little bit of pressure censorship on Candace Owens merely because she has posted opinions that we might not agree with, or maybe even we don't like? Are we dipping our toe into those waters from a social media and public pressure standpoint, or public shaming standpoint, to that matter? What do you see it from a journalist perspective?
So my big consideration would be when the question is posed or the statement is made where I'm just asking questions, that's trying to remove yourself from any culpability of the answers you're receiving. It's putting yourself on a supposed, well, this is okay, it doesn't matter how I do it. And there has to be a self-consciousness that goes into whatever questions we ask. There's always a goal. There's always something that needs to be determined. They're supposed to be in the pursuit of truth. The questions we ask matter, and then the way in which we ask those questions also matter. So in regards to specifically Candace here, she has really thrived on just asking the questions and often leaving it murky along the way until she gets to a couple episodes in, then she'll make her point. I don't think that makes her a grifter. That makes her an excellent user of social influencing platforms, where you bring people along in a journey of self-discovery until the end. She's an excellent model of that. I would just caution everybody that we need to make sure when we're asking questions, there's always a goal in mind.
Yeah, I just want to add to that just real quickly. I do find it interesting. That has been her model, and I think people have used her in the exact same way. I look at her inclusion with the Daily Wire. That seemed like a situation where they were like, "Hey, here's a black woman who is speaking out against critical race theory and DEI, and trying to encourage black voters to vote for Republican, for Trump or whatever." And so they saw her as a gold mine or as an opportunity, versus, hey, we want to, disciple this young budding journalist who will become a stand for truth kind of person. I feel like the whole saga around her has just been, she's using her platform to kind of like build her brand, but at the same time, people have used her for the exact same thing.
Kevin, I want to ask you, you mentioned the just asking questions piece. I don't think that's something that's going to go away. It's very popular to use. You mentioned it's kind of a way to separate maybe yourself from culpability of the answer. At the same time, one of the arguments is going to be, and certainly is, as you know, well, no one's asking the question. So at least somebody is asking a question. What is the way, as a journalist, what are the ways the questions should be asked? Even, no matter if they're off the wall or not, how should journalists, how should social media influencers be just asking questions in a way that might benefit the conversation, as opposed to just being sensational?
Yeah, and I think right there, I think you're putting your thumb right on it there with the sensationalism. Oftentimes it is easy just to ask the question because nobody else is asking it, and I'm just going to put it out there and we'll just leave it there. But there's always consideration to be made. And I think there's a moral responsibility where when we ask questions, when we go a route, we need to take care that this could damage somebody's reputation. This could it could be interpreted as bringing a false slight against somebody. And so there's a moral responsibility to make sure the questions we're asking get to the heart of the matter. The ninth commandment, you shall not lie, actually pertains to journalism in that sense, that whatever we're communicating needs to be truth, and as best as we can understand the truth. We don't have omniscience. We can't know all things at all times, but there is a responsibility to ask questions that uncover the truth. And even if they are difficult, we should be asking difficult questions. I'm not saying we shouldn't ask difficult questions, but it's not something for just, I think our social media has produced a cavalier attitude of just, there's no consequences to actions, but that just speaks more to our culture versus the truth of journalism.
Yeah, and I would think as well, too, like just speaking with someone like Candace Owens, I think we miss an opportunity. I'm just speaking for me, not cross politic. I think we miss an opportunity to either be more well-rounded and grounded in what we actually believe about a particular topic, by, instead of engaging in any kind of intellectual discussion or debate, even with things that we might find very outlandish, but instead by just saying, well, okay, that's a grifter, or you've gone conspiratorial, or you're off the reservation, or whatever it is. That seems to me the same kind of, well, I'm just saying, just in a different package. Justin, I want to ask you last question here on this topic, and then we're about out of time here on this episode. But do you think Christians and conservatives are being too harsh, too dismissive? I don't know, unfair. I don't like the term fair necessarily, but maybe inconsistent is a better word. to and toward Candace Owens in the pushback that she has gotten from the right?
So I think there has been some of that, to be sure. I think as you kind of progress through Luke's article, I think he is making a valid point. And it's not just Candace Owens that does this. It's everybody seems to like to take advantage of a tragedy. Some of her responses to Kirk's death have been to kind of self-aggrandize herself. He mentioned a tribute video where, she was basically just saying, yeah, I was the one that, got Charlie Kirk to stop drinking. I'm the one that got Charlie Kirk to, be more influential culturally. She's taking a lot of credit for those things. And maybe there's a time and a place where she can have those conversations. It's not, a memorial tribute to a man who was murdered. Those are not the times or places. But, I think, she, like I said, she's not alone in that. She's not the only person who will do things like that. We have a president for as much good as he has done, in office and publicly, some of his stands that he's made against things that I definitely disagree with. He's not above kind of taking more credit than maybe he deserves for some things. So again, she's not the only one doing this. But I do think that, there are some, I put it, sacred cows in our public discourse. And one of those has been the nation of Israel and the American involvement there in response to certain things. And she has been very public about her skepticism and even some of her accusations. And I do think that in that case, Christians probably have been a little bit too fast to judge and condemn versus engage with that topic.
We have, first thing for that, I want to mention we got a couple of comments here coming in online. TS for them, thanks for hanging out with us today. TS for them saying she's a grifter for clicks. That's a position, and I feel like we're watching Candace Owens spiral into absolute insanity. We can certainly see that, or we can certainly interpret that, depending on again where you're looking at this from. But again, that's why we want to have this discussion, because also if you have somebody who at least at one time claimed to be a follower of Christ, and is espousing views, either from a Christian and in this conservative perspective, we need to look at that at least on balance and try to engage it as intellectually as possible. We're right up on it and out of time. Kevin, thank you for being with us here. We are here every Friday at noon Eastern. And if you haven't yet, you can like the video, subscribe to Cross Politic News channel here on YouTube, and also crosspoliticnews.com. There's the tab right there. This is the home page. You'll notice the two stories we covered today, Pastor Voddie Baucham and Candace Owens, right there at the top. You can check that out. Be sure to do that. We appreciate you for being with us on this episode. Justin, want to give a tease maybe for some stories we're working on for next week. Is there anything that's catching your eye upcoming in Cross Politic News?
Yeah, we had some breaking news this morning. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister in England, United Kingdom, announcing that going forward, to be employed in that country, you will require, specific, IDs to be able to be employed. So again, this kind of runs back to the COVID conversation, to certain IDs that you have to have certain things in order to work, to live in certain places. So
that even gets into end time stuff. That's going to be a very exciting story, because isn't that one of the things? Hey, you're going to need the mark on your hand or the mark on your forehead. You can't buy, work, or sell. Oh my goodness, are we laying that framework right now? One could argue that. Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the UK, saying we're going to go to mandatory digital IDs, or you cannot work in the United Kingdom. We look to follow that up. Anything else that we can look forward to?
We are coming up into the month of October here next month. We're going to have some election coverage coming up pretty strong across politic news. But it's not necessarily what you would expect. It's not going to, we don't have any national races really to talk about, but we do have a lot of local municipalities, city elections for city council, school board, things that actually impact us on a real level. So look for that here coming up in the next month, and we're definitely going to be talking about that, going forward.
All right. And lastly, Kevin, I know you're a contributor and a journalist. Anything you're working on that we can be looking out for? Maybe not next week, but just in the coming weeks.
Yeah, there is going to be an article piece that I'm putting out on the Pastor Mark Robinette, who passed away a couple of years ago. Actually, it was just last year due to a house fire. He just got awarded posthumously a medal for his valor and self-sacrifice for trying to save 2 of his children. So
that'll be a powerful story. We'll look forward to that. All right. Well, thanks to Kevin. Thank you, Justin. Thanks to you all for hanging out with us here in this episode of Cross Politic Countdown. We'll be back next Friday, noon Eastern. We'll see you then. Remember, crosspoliticnews.com.